Thank you, Sharon. Hello. Thanks for being here, too. What I called mine was ʻrē-ະ-ʻlīn because I'm going to be showing work over the last 10 years that I've produced, and because it's pointing me to a direction of what I do outside of work, more so than inside of work, and I want to be focusing more on developing some books. I don't necessarily call them illustrated books. I more see myself as literally a storyteller that works off of what my background has been, which started out to be architecture, and then moved into interior architecture, and then a love for graphic design. So I really like to deal with different narrative contents in what I started to learn is mark making, or else drawing. And I work in pen and ink predominantly, probably fairly small, less than 8.5 by 11, and I just sit down and start to draw. So none of these have pencil on them, I just start to draw, and this is what comes out of my head. But from that, I started to work with, besides the forms, I also started to think about what is the narrative, what am I trying to say with particular clients if I'm dealing with it in that way, books if I'm dealing with that. This is part of it's a mural illustration that was for my last firm that I had worked with, just because they wanted something that said, we do architecture, but we don't want to be specific. So it really is about trying to just capture movement, work with three-point perspective. I like to warp and twist things. I like a lot of pattern. So a lot of my stuff just deals with surface and dealing with movement. At least when it comes to dealing with architectural components. I like the built environment or the human-made environment. Things that are which man has touched or humankind has touched, but not necessarily does it have to show people involved. These are some mural elements I did for a client that was all they make paint. And that's all they said. We make paint, explain what we do. So I started to really more romanticize some of the drawing, and then I colorized and add other supplemental elements that all deal with the history of the client without necessarily being just pure pictures. They become more illustrative of their past and their present and their future. Some more here. The next series of slides that you're going to see are all based off of a book by a short story by Orson Scott Card. I did a limited edition book called The Porcelain Salamander, and it all tells the story of a young girl who buys a toy, and that toy helps to essentially make her healthy again because she's in poor health at the beginning of the story. At the end, she is anew and refreshed. But I decided to take a different look at the story and decided to say, I don't want to illustrate the story directly. So if you follow my images throughout the story, they're the pre-story. They're all about how the salamander was made with love and care and how that was transmitted to the girl and it actually helped her in her development of growth and health. And so all these drawings are just supplemental ones that I did throughout the book. It's about a 50-page book, and I think there's a total of 25 illustrations throughout the book. I don't like letting things sit still on the page. Everything tends to be always in movement. And you'll see more of it later. Actually, these are all black and white. I work with a lot of color, usually, or sometimes very simple color, which is what you're more seeing out here to isolate information and detail. These are a series of drawings that became a different book called Midwest of Life. It was actually based off my grandfather. It was all about the agrarian nature of his life in the middle of Indiana. And they're just snapshots and glimpses into his everyday living. And I actually talked to him about it before developing the book itself. On the left is a mural I did that's all based off Noah's Ark. And on the right is a different interpretation of water. From a good friend of mine, it was a mural and then became prints for a friend of mine who's all fascination with boats and the interface with the city. There's a small little boat at the top. I also did a series of images based off of Darwin's Origin of Species, trying to relate, in this one, trying to relate the relationship of what we see to what's behind, a sort of romanticization versus scientific interpretation. And the whole series I did all relate on that context. This is part of The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Throughout this book, you never see the raven. You only see glimpses of the raven or attitude of what the raven causes. And also to increase the dark sensibility throughout the piece. There's like 3 illustrations here that are from that piece. The element on the right side is actually components of the raven that appear throughout the text, but you never get the glimpse of the entire raven at once. I do a lot of graphic design work, although it's kind of a little bit bright on the right side, where I incorporate my drawings into the graphic work. Here it's just a spot illustration work with the line drawing. Again, I work fairly small, I scan it in, and then I really try to actually enhance what I'm doing here. It's just mostly more for activities and reiteration. On these, it's for the Louisville Opera, which is all for the 3 different operas that they were focusing on. Again, here is where I try to implement some color to reemphasize the statements, whether it's about being hidden behind something, whether it's about hope, or whether it's about despair. I'm trying to reemphasize that with the coloration, as well as branding of it. This is just one of the spot illustrations from that grouping. And the last one, not only is it a thank you, this was also one from the Midwest book, which is starting to lead to where I want to go with my next books, which is all about, or representing, it is a lot of color, but I'm also going to deal with a book of the human-built environment based off specific elements that we all live with every day and take for granted. So I want to do a book that has no language in it, it's all images. So, thank you very much.